My name's Daniel Mercer. I was 35 when my father decided that my life didn't belong to me anymore. I wasn't surprised, to be honest. He always ran our family like a corporation and me like an underperforming asset. He'd built Belridge Steel from the ground up. Old school deals, hard hats, union handshakes. I grew up watching him grind through 20-hour days, growing it from a warehouse operation into a multi-million-dollar manufacturer. The kind of man who built everything with his fists, his pride, and a healthy dose of intimidation. The kind who never asked, only ordered. I worked in that company since I was 17. Started from the floor, earned my mechanical engineering degree at night, and rose up the ranks. But no matter what I accomplished, I was never quite enough for him. I didn't speak like he did. I didn't smoke cigars with contractors or bark orders. I believed in strategy, not brute force. And maybe that was the real problem. When the cracks started to show, contracts drying up, steel imports undercutting prices, debts piling, he never told me. I had to hear it from the finance director, quietly over lunch one day. Your dad's leveraged everything. If this next quarter doesn't hit, it's over. I offered solutions. Cost restructuring, partnerships, asset repurposing. He scoffed. What we need is stability, Daniel, not MBA bull, a real alliance, like the old days when men fixed problems with handshakes and family ties. Then came the dinner. Just me, my father, and Leonard Kessler, the old real estate tycoon who owned half the warehouses in our region. Kessler had a daughter, Sophia. I remembered her from school. She was quiet, brilliant, always had her head buried in books. Our lives had never crossed paths since then. "This is what makes sense," my father said. "You and Sophia. Marriage, family alliance. Our companies consolidate. Their capital, our infrastructure." I blinked. "You want me to marry her to bail you out?" "To secure the future of what we built. And don't act like it's a sacrifice. She's smart, beautiful, and from a damn good family." I wanted to stand up and walk out, but I didn't. Not because I agreed, because I saw it for what it was. A power move, a last-ditch act of desperation. If I said no, he'd blame the collapse on me. If I said yes, I'd be complicit in something I didn't believe in. But maybe I could find a third path. So I met Sophia again. At first, it was cordial, awkward. She knew what was going on. Her father was as blunt as mine, but there was something about her eyes, observant, unshaken. She wasn't a pawn. She was calculating something, too. The wedding was arranged in 6 weeks. No big ceremony, just a formal affair in a country estate her family owned. On the surface, it looked like tradition, but beneath it all, it was a merger disguised as matrimony. My father beamed like a king returning from war. I kept my expression neutral. I had accepted the terms of the deal, but I had questions, and something told me Sophia did too. It wasn't until I stood at the altar, watching her walk down that aisle with unreadable grace, that I realized she was playing a game of her own, and I was about to find out exactly how deep it went. I didn't fight the marriage. I didn't protest at the altar. I didn't storm out or make a scene when my father raised his glass to toast the joining of two legacies. I just stood there, calm, polite, present. I'd learned over the years that the quiet man in the room often hears the most, and I wanted to hear everything. Sophie and I exchanged vows like seasoned negotiators, respectful, measured, almost clinical. When we kissed, it was soft, not awkward, but not romantic either. Just understood. A sealed agreement. That night, in the quiet of the guest house on her family's estate, we shared a drink. No celebration, no awkward attempts at intimacy, just silence until I finally spoke. "You know why this happened." Sophia didn't blink. "Your father's broke, mine's old. They both believe in legacy." I studied her face. Calm, sharp, unfazed. "You agreed to this," I said carefully. "So did you." She had a point. We didn't talk about feelings, not that night. Instead, we talked about logistics, living arrangements, company integration, press releases, like we were co-managing a project, not a marriage. And maybe in a way that's what it was. I moved into the condo Sophia owned downtown. Sleek, modern, minimal. It didn't feel like home, but I wasn't sure I remembered what home was supposed to feel like anymore. The following week, we started showing up together at board meetings and company functions, publicly united, privately, respectful, distant. My father was thrilled. Contract stabilized, Kessler's firm infused just enough capital to hold the bleeding. My father strutted through the office like a man 10 years younger, telling anyone who'd listen that Daniel had finally manned up. I let him talk. Instead, I observed. I took mental notes, patterns, shifts in tone. Sophia sat in on every meeting, asked pointed questions about supply chains, export licenses, even labor costs, questions most brides in arranged marriages wouldn't bother with. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about saving her father's legacy. She had her own game, and I wasn't sure if I was a partner in it or a target. I didn't ask. I watched. Back home, we settled into a rhythm. Separate rooms, shared dinners once or twice a week. She worked late, so did I. We barely spoke unless necessary. Still, there was no coldness between us, just a kind of mutual restraint, like two chess players circling the center of the board, waiting for the other to move first. One night, I returned from a late factory inspection and found her on the balcony staring at the skyline. She didn't turn around when I stepped outside. "They think we're puppets," she said, voice soft. "Are we?" She looked at me then, the faintest smile touching her lips. "Only if we play by their rules." That stuck with me. From that moment, I began looking at everything differently. My father's accounts, his leadership decisions, Sophia's influence in her father's company, the way she'd already started shifting senior staff and pushing new operational models. She wasn't just playing house. She was restructuring power. And so was I. I began building a file. Nothing aggressive, just information. Quietly, methodically. Financial documents, legal ownership records, company control clauses, succession plans. Because if this marriage was a deal, then I needed to know exactly what was on the table. What my father didn't know was that he hadn't arranged a merger. He'd triggered a corporate war. And both of us, Sophia and I, were armed. A few weeks after the wedding, things started to shift. Not dramatically, just small, subtle cracks in the surface. And if I hadn't been paying close attention, I might have missed them. But I was watching everything now, and something wasn't adding up. It started with a factory tour in our southern distribution site. I'd done it dozens of times before, but this time, the plant manager looked uneasy, nervous almost. When I asked about some recent equipment purchases, he hesitated, then muttered that all decisions now went through the Kessler liaison. That was news to me. Our procurement division was under my father's control, or at least it used to be. The next day, I asked my father about it. He waved it off. "Standard partnership agreement," he said. "Kessler's people want oversight. That's the price of liquidity." I didn't push. I just nodded. That night, I reviewed the official merger documents. There was nothing, absolutely nothing about external procurement oversight. No clause, no amendment. The deal had been clean, on paper. So who was giving orders behind the scenes? The answer, it turned out, was Sophia. I traced the Kessler liaison to a shell firm she controlled through a consulting group, quietly inserted into our logistics chain 2 weeks after the wedding. She'd taken over equipment contracts and warehousing decisions without ever stepping into a factory. And she did it so elegantly, so seamlessly, that even our board didn't realize they were following her lead. I wasn't angry. If anything, I was impressed. It confirmed what I already suspected. She was running her own operation, separate from both fathers. She didn't want to inherit the empire. She wanted to rebuild it in her image. But then came the part that shook me. While sorting through our tax compliance filings, a routine task, I noticed something odd. A payment made from my father's private company account to a consultancy I didn't recognize. Nothing huge, just under $18,000, but I cross-checked it against the work orders and found nothing. No service provided, no matching entry in any operational ledger. So I looked deeper. Turns out this same consultancy had received 5 other payments, smaller, more frequent, over the last 6 months, all authorized by my father. And the contact person listed on those invoices, a man named Richard Darnell. That name hit me like ice. Darnell used to run a subcontracting company in upstate New York. He got blacklisted 5 years ago after getting caught running falsified safety inspections on industrial sites, including one where 2 workers died in an equipment failure. I remember because I was the one who flagged the red flags back then. My father had let him go, but quietly. No formal charges, just silence and a golden handshake. And now he was back under a different name, funneled through Sophia's network? No, that didn't track. I checked again. No, it wasn't Sophia's signature on the new invoices. It was my father's. The implications settled in slowly. He wasn't just desperate. He was corner-cutting, risking legal exposure, bringing back men we'd buried for good reason. But the worst part? Sophia had to know. She was too sharp, too detail-oriented not to notice, which meant one of 2 things. Either she was ignoring it, or she was leveraging it. I sat in my office long after everyone left that night, staring at the 2 stacks of paper in front of me, one with my father's betrayal, the other with Sophia's power moves. Different motivations, same result. They were both using me as a bridge to their ambitions. But what neither of them saw was that I'd already started building my own bridge, and mine wouldn't carry anyone but me. Once I saw the full board, the strategy became obvious. This wasn't a family alliance. It was a takeover from both sides. My father using me as a pawn to keep the company afloat with Kessler's money. Sophia using the marriage to install her own infrastructure from the inside. And somehow, both thought I'd stay silent, stuck in the middle, watching them reshape my world without lifting a hand. But I hadn't spent 20 years learning every corner of Belridge steel just to hand it over to opportunists. I'd waited, watched, and now it was time to act. Quietly, strategically, the way they never saw coming. I started with legal groundwork. Reached out to an old Army buddy, Marcus Lennox, now a corporate attorney in Chicago. He'd always said, if I ever needed off-the-books precision, he was a phone call away. This is internal, but messy, I told him over a secure line. You want to blow it up or take control? Not blow it up, I said. Flip the board. Clean. He whistled. Okay, tell me everything. I sent him documents, copies of the side payments to Darnell's fake consultancy, the ownership trail behind Sophia's shell firms, procurement contracts rerouted with outboard knowledge. It wasn't criminal on its face, but the pattern, it reeked of shadow control. While Marcus built the legal case, I started securing allies inside, quiet ones. David Singh, head of plant operations. He and I had worked shoulder to shoulder during the COVID shutdowns to keep our lines running. I trusted him. When I showed him the fake contracts, he didn't say much, but his eyes darkened. I'm in, whatever you're doing, he said. I added him to my list. Then came Julia Ramsey, head of finance. She'd been kept in the dark like I had. But when I revealed what I'd found, she didn't panic. She got to work. Give me a week, she said. I'll find out exactly how far this goes. Sophia, meanwhile, stayed cordial, distant. She still played the role, joint board meetings, occasional dinners, keeping the image intact. But I could sense it. She knew something was shifting. She asked more questions about my schedule, started mentioning long-term plans, relocating headquarters, bringing in new management. She was positioning. And that meant I had to accelerate. I drafted a formal motion for a board vote, one that would reassign operational oversight temporarily to an independent executive committee. On the surface, it was a neutral request for stability during integration, but behind the scenes, Marcus helped me structure it so that the committee would include Julia, David, and me. 3 votes, enough to stall the power grab. But I needed one more thing: leverage. So I went back to the beginning, to the Darnell connection, and what I found made my blood run cold. Buried in a logistics contract, a signed letter of compliance from Darnell himself, dated just 2 months ago, certifying safety standards at one of our newest expansion warehouses. The same Darnell who had no license, no legal right to sign off on anything. If OSHA saw this, it wouldn't just be fines. It could mean criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and the signature? My father's. Clear as day. I made a copy and locked it away, not to destroy him, but to stop him if it came to that. Because now I had everything I needed: allies, documents, leverage. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to dismantle them, both of them, using the very systems they'd built around me. The rules hadn't changed, but the player had. The board meeting was set for Thursday at 9 a.m., just another item on the quarterly agenda. Nobody knew what was coming, except for me, Julia, David, and Marcus, who would be present via remote counsel under the guise of observational support. I arrived early, wore the same gray suit I'd worn to the wedding. A reminder to myself, that day might have looked like surrender, but this was the real ceremony. Sophia entered at 8:45, poised, collected, as always. She gave me a polite nod, then took her place across the table. My father came in last, shaking hands, cracking jokes with the junior board members, basking in the illusion of control. The agenda rolled on. Quarterly losses, minor contract wins, routine stuff. Then, just as they were about to adjourn, I raised my hand. I'd like to introduce a motion. All eyes turned. My father narrowed his. This isn't on the agenda, Daniel. Emergency clause, I said, tapping the charter in front of me. Operational integrity concerns. That shut him up. I passed out the motion papers. On the surface, it was modest, requesting that day-to-day oversight of procurement, safety, and financial compliance be temporarily reassigned to an independent executive committee until audit completion. But tucked into the fine print, backed by legal precedent Marcus had buried in the references, was the hook. That oversight would include authority to review and freeze contracts, terminate temporary consultants, and demand full transparency across all subsidiaries. Julia and David were named as executive members. So was I. My father looked at the paper for a long time. Then he laughed. "You think you're clever." I didn't respond. Sophia's face was unreadable, but her fingers tapped the table. A tell. A vote was called. I already had Julia and David. I only needed 2 more to reach the minimum for temporary enforcement. And I had them. Elliot Warner and Carla Mejia, 2 board members I'd quietly met with earlier in the week. When I'd shown them the payments to Darnell's firm and explained the legal risk to their own positions, they didn't hesitate. 5 votes in favor, motion passed. Silence. My father looked like someone had just drained the blood from his body. Sophia? She just nodded once. That was the moment I realized she'd known I'd strike, but not when or how. As the meeting ended, I stood slowly. There is a preliminary audit beginning this afternoon. All consultants, contract paths, and safety certifications will be reviewed. Anyone with relevant access or knowledge should cooperate fully. I turned to my father. That includes legacy account holders. And then to Sophia. and strategic partners with procurement ties. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence was enough. That afternoon, Julia's team began combing through records. David initiated internal compliance sweeps, and Marcus, quietly, submitted preliminary findings to our insurance compliance bureau, just enough to signal we were taking steps before things became litigious. By evening, I had everything locked. The consulting firm tied to Sophia's shell was frozen. Payments halted. Darnell's name triggered a secondary legal inquiry, and the most critical warehouse project, the one certified with his forged signature, was suspended pending investigation. The press release went out the next morning, dry, corporate. In response to internal oversight reviews, Belridge Steel will undergo a temporary structural audit led by an executive committee. But within the industry, the message was clear. Something was happening. And for the first time in months, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. By Monday, the tremors turned into shockwaves. Julia's team uncovered 2 more shell companies tied to the same P.O. boxes as the Darnell firm, one under Sophia's cousin's name, another linked to an advisor who'd never appeared on payroll. Combined, they'd siphoned over $470,000 through inflated equipment leases and consulting retainers. It wasn't embezzlement on paper, but it was orchestration, hidden hands moving money, cutting backdoor deals in the dark. Sophia didn't deny the companies existed. In fact, she didn't say anything at all. She stopped coming home. Instead, her assistant delivered a neutral statement to the committee, acknowledging the need for transparency and pledging full cooperation. Her tone was all professionalism, but I saw the chess move underneath. Distance herself, stall the process, let the dust settle. But I wasn't letting this settle. My father, on the other hand, exploded. He stormed into my office Tuesday morning, red-faced and shouting, "You just declared war on your own family." I stayed seated. No, I enforced accountability, something this company hasn't seen in years. He jabbed a finger at me. "You think you've won something? You think this makes you the hero? You're nothing without the Belridge name." I looked him dead in the eye. "And you're nothing if that name ends up in court filings and SEC reports. You brought this risk in. I'm just cleaning it up." He slammed the door so hard, a picture fell off the wall. Later that day, Julia called me into her office. "We have something." She slid over an email thread between Sophia and one of the Kessler family attorneys. It was about the marriage, specifically a clause I'd never seen before, a prenuptial appendix filed in a private family trust, not disclosed during our legal review. In it, Sophia's company would gain immediate 49% control of Belridge procurement operations in the event of a critical liquidity event within 6 months of marriage. And the trigger for that event? Defaulting on 2 specific vendor contracts her firm now controlled. I sat back in the chair. "She married into control," I said, quietly. She nodded. "And your father either didn't read the full document or didn't care." It all made sense. Sophia had never been a pawn. She hadn't just played the game better, she'd designed it. But now she was exposed. I met with Marcus that evening. We drafted an official challenge to the undisclosed prenuptial clause, citing breach of transparency and conflict of interest. It wouldn't kill the agreement outright, but it froze her control for now, and in a corporate battle, a freeze was often as good as a win. The next morning, I received an invitation. A meeting, private, from Sophia. No assistants, no lawyers. Just her. I arrived at her high-rise condo at 8 p.m. She opened the door in silence and gestured toward the table where 2 glasses of wine waited. The city lights poured in behind her. She looked tired, not defeated, just worn down. "She never lied to you," she said. I didn't answer. "She lied to them." Still, I said nothing. Finally, she sat down and looked straight at me. "I didn't expect you to fight back like this." I made her gaze. "And I didn't expect you to fight at all." There was no anger between us, just the quiet understanding of two tacticians who'd gone to war under the same roof. Then she said something that stayed with me. "I wasn't trying to ruin you, Daniel. I just didn't think you mattered." That was the truth. And that was the last time we spoke as husband and wife. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came in waves. By the end of the month, the internal audit report was complete. Julia presented it to the full board, line by line, with attachments so detailed there wasn't room for denial. 3 shell companies, over $700,000 in diverted funds, multiple undisclosed relationships, and 1 forged safety certification. None of it criminal, yet, but all of it unethical, and most importantly, damning to reputations. The board moved fast. They voted to dissolve the procurement agreements established through Sophia's entities and severed all third-party ties connected to Kessler Holdings. Legal called it a complete restructuring. The press, however, called it something else. Belridge Steel breaks off strategic alliance after internal fraud review. CEO's son leads quiet reclamation amid scandal. My father stepped down from his executive role that same week, officially for health reasons. Privately, the board made it clear, step down or be investigated alongside the rest. He didn't speak to me after that. I think part of him still couldn't believe I'd had the guts to do it. The son he'd once called soft, too quiet, too careful. And yet I was the one who'd saved the company he built. Sophia didn't show up to the emergency board meeting where her influence was officially revoked. Instead, her lawyer sent a formal resignation from the advisory role she'd held. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a single paragraph of legal detachment. But her father, Leonard Kessler, wasn't so lucky. The fallout from the Belridge scandal triggered a closer look at Kessler Holdings. Turns out Sophia's maneuver wasn't a solo play. Leonard had been orchestrating similar mergers across smaller regional firms, marriages, acquisitions, joint ventures, all with buried control clauses in personal contracts. Belridge was just the one that caught fire. The Department of Commerce launched a quiet inquiry. SEC filings were amended, and Leonard was forced to liquidate 2 of his largest holdings just to stabilize investor confidence. His empire didn't fall in flames. It bled out, slowly. Meanwhile, the company my father built endured. Under my leadership, and yes, that word still felt strange, we began restructuring operations from the inside out. Julia was promoted to CFO, David took over plant oversight full-time, and I made it clear to the board, no more legacy deals, no more untraceable contracts. Everything would run clean, transparent, and legally bulletproof. We lost some clients, those who liked the old-school handshake games, but we gained others, real ones. Clients who respected process, documentation, leadership. One afternoon, I got a call from a journalist doing a deep dive on the industry fallout. He said, "They say you married into power and then dismantled it from within. Is that true?" I smiled faintly. "No, I married into illusion and just refused to play along." The story ran 2 weeks later. The headline made me pause. "The son who stayed silent until the moment he took back everything." I didn't correct it. Back at home, the condo felt different now. Still quiet, still cold, but something had shifted. It wasn't a battleground anymore, just a place where I'd learned who I was when the storm hit. Sophia filed for an annulment instead of a divorce. Clean break, no contest, No claims to Belridge or anything attached to it. We didn't even meet in court. Just papers, signatures, and silence. But in that silence, I found something I hadn't expected. Peace. I didn't win by shouting louder. I didn't win by matching their ruthlessness. I won by being what neither of them expected. Prepared.
It's been a year since the day I stood at that altar, surrounded by tradition, pressure, and the illusion of unity. A year since the day I quietly stepped into a marriage meant to rescue a company and uncovered the truth about everyone around me, including myself. I don't live in that downtown condo anymore. I sold it 6 months ago. Too many shadows in the walls. Too many late nights spent wondering whether silence was strength or just avoidance. I bought a small place just outside the city. A modest home with a porch, a view of the valley, and enough space to breathe. No staff, no formal dinners, no legacy portraits on the wall. Just peace. Belridge is still standing. Stronger, actually. Smaller in some ways, but cleaner. We dropped the shady suppliers, invested in automation where it made sense, promoted people who'd been overlooked for years, people who'd stuck with us through the chaos, people like Julia and David, people who didn't care about last names or inheritance, but cared about the work. I don't hear from my father anymore. Last I checked, he moved down to South Carolina, living off his pension and what little he kept after resigning. I'm not angry with him anymore. The truth is, I think he loved the company more than he ever knew how to love a son. I understand that now. Doesn't mean I accept it, but I understand it. Sophia. I haven't spoken to her since the annulment papers were finalized. Word is, she's consulting overseas now. Asia, maybe. Her kind of strategy works better in markets where rules bend more easily. Part of me still wonders if she ever felt anything real, or if I was always just a transaction. But I've stopped trying to answer that question. Some answers don't matter as much as they used to. A few months ago, I received a letter, handwritten, from a junior project manager at one of our plants. Said he'd heard what happened last year, how I stood up to my father, protected the company, didn't let it fall. He wrote, "I didn't think quiet guys like us could lead, but you made me think maybe we can." I pinned that letter to the corkboard in my office. Not because I needed validation, but because in all the noise of betrayal and power plays, that one sentence reminded me why I stayed calm through it all. Because someone always watches the quiet ones, and sometimes they need to know we're watching back. I walk differently now. Not faster, not louder, just firmer. I don't chase approval anymore. Don't wait for someone else to say I belong. I've learned that legacy means nothing if you don't respect the present. That building something new isn't weakness, it's courage. Some nights I sit on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sky change color behind the hills, and I think about everything that's happened, the lies, the manipulation, the fake alliances, and I don't feel rage. I don't even feel regret. I feel grateful. Because they tried to use me as a bridge between two dying empires, but I became something else entirely. I became the architect of my own. And that, more than any board vote or power grab, is the victory they never saw coming.